The winter air hung heavy in the small town of Millview, where snow dusted the streets like powdered sugar on a forgotten cake. The corner store, a squat building with flickering neon signs, glowed faintly against the dusk. Its windows, streaked with frost, reflected the pale orange of a single street lamp. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and cardboard, the kind of place where time seemed to pause, letting the world outside carry on without it. James Carter stood at the counter, his breath visible in the chilly store. His coat, frayed at the cuffs, hung loosely on his thin frame. In his arms, he cradled a pack of diapers, the cheapest brand, their plastic wrapper crinkling softly as he shifted his weight. His daughter, Lily, was at home with a neighbor, her tiny body wrapped in the last clean diaper he'd found in the cupboard. The thought of her round, trusting eyes tightened his chest. He was 32, but the lines on his face told a story of years heavier than his age. The cashier, a young man, the diapers with a slow beep. "That's $8.99, she said, her voice flat, as if she'd said it 1,000 times that day. James reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the worn leather of his wallet. He knew what he'd find: a single dollar bill, crumpled and soft from too many worried touches. His heart sank, a familiar ache. He'd been out of work for 3 months since the factory closed, and the odd jobs, shoveling snow, fixing fences, weren't enough to stretch his savings further. I thought they were on sale," James said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He glanced at the shelf behind him, hoping he'd misread the price tag. The numbers stared back, unyielding: $8.99. Tina sighed, not unkindly. "They were last week. Sale's over." She paused, her fingers hovering over the register, as if giving him a moment to find a miracle. James's hands trembled as he opened his wallet, the dollar bill sitting alone, mocking him. He thought of Lily, her soft giggles, the way she reached for him when he tucked her in. He couldn't go home empty-handed. Not again. His throat tightened, and he swallowed hard, the weight of failure pressing down like the snow outside. Behind him, the store was quiet except for the hum of a fluorescent light. A man stood in line, his presence unnoticed until now. He was tall, dressed in a long black coat that looked too expensive for a place like Millview. His face was sharp, with high cheekbones and dark eyes that seemed to carry their own shadows. He held a single bottle of water, his fingers wrapped around it loosely, as if he didn't care much for it. His name, though James didn't know it yet, was Ethan Caldwell, a man whose name appeared in business articles and on skyscraper plaques, but never in places like this. James turned back to Tina, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can you hold these? I'll come back tomorrow." He knew it was a lie. Tomorrow wouldn't bring more money, only more bills, more calls from creditors he couldn't answer. Tina nodded, her expression softening. "Sure, hun, I'll keep him behind the counter." She reached for the diapers, but before she could take them, a voice broke the silence. "I'll take them all." The words were calm, almost casual, but they landed like a stone in still water. James froze, his hand still on the diaper pack. He turned slowly, meeting the gaze of the man in the black coat. Ethan's eyes were steady, unreadable, but there was something in them, a flicker of something softer, like a memory he'd buried long ago. "What?" James asked, his voice rough with confusion. Ethan stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking softly on the linoleum. "The diapers," he said, nodding toward the pack in James's hands. "I'll buy them. All of them. For you." James blinked, his mind struggling to process the words. I don't understand." "Why would you?" Ethan raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "You need them, don't you?" His voice was low, measured, but there was a weight to it, like he was speaking from a place deeper than the moment called for. James's face flushed, a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. "I can't let you do that," he said, though his voice wavered. "I don't even know you." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile, not mocking but tired, as if he'd seen too much of the world to argue. "You don't have to know me. Just take them. For your kid." The store seemed to hold its breath. Tina watched, her hands still on the register, her eyes darting between the two men. Outside, a car passed, its headlights cutting through the snow for a moment before fading into the dark. James's grip tightened on the diapers, his pride warring with his desperation. He thought of Lily again, her small hands clutching his finger, the way she trusted him to make everything okay. He swallowed, his eyes stinging. "Thank you," he said finally, the words heavy with everything he couldn't say. Ethan nodded, pulling a sleek wallet from his coat. He handed Tina a card, its black surface catching the light. "Add whatever else he needs," he said, glancing at James. "Formula, wipes, anything." James shook his head, his voice unsteady. "That's too much. I can't." "It's not," Ethan said, his tone firm but not unkind. "Just let me do this." Tina rang up the diapers, a pack of wipes, and a small can of formula James hadn't dared to hope for. The total came to $24.67. Ethan didn't flinch as he swiped his card, the transaction as effortless as breathing for him. For James, it was a lifeline, a moment of grace he hadn't expected in a world that had felt so cruel. As Tina bagged the items, James looked at Ethan, searching for words. "Why?" he asked simply, his voice raw. "Why help me?" Ethan hesitated, his eyes drifting to the window, where snowflakes danced in the street lamp's glow. For a moment, he looked far away, lost in a memory. "Because I know what it's like to need help," he said finally, his voice so soft it barely carried. "And I know what it's like to have no one." James didn't know what to say. He wanted to ask more, to understand the man who'd appeared like a ghost in a snowstorm, but the moment felt fragile, like it might shatter if he pushed too hard. Ethan picked up his bottle of water, turning toward the door. "Take care of your kid," he said, his back already to James. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped into the night, his figure swallowed by the snow. James stood there, clutching the bag, its weight a quiet promise to Lily. He felt lighter, not just because of the diapers but because, for the first time in months, someone had seen him, not as a failure, but as a father trying his best. The next morning, Millview woke to a sky cleared of clouds, the sun glinting off fresh snow. James sat at his kitchen table, a small, cluttered space lit by a single bulb. Lily was in her high chair, babbling as she smeared oatmeal on her tray. The diapers, wipes, and formula sat on the counter, a reminder of the stranger's kindness. James sipped his coffee, its warmth seeping into his hands, and let himself feel something he hadn't in a long time: hope. Across town, in a sleek office atop a glass building, Ethan Caldwell sat alone. His desk was bare except for a laptop and a single photo frame, its glass smudged from years of handling. The photo showed a young boy, no older than 3, with Ethan's dark eyes and a gap-toothed smile. Ethan's fingers traced the frame, a habit he'd never broken. He'd built an empire, a name that echoed in boardrooms, but the boy in the photo was gone, lost to a life Ethan couldn't save. Last night, in that corner store, he'd seen something of himself in James, the quiet desperation, the weight of love that could break a man. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the city sprawling below him, its lights winking like stars. He didn't know James's name, didn't know if he'd ever see him again. But for the first time in years, he felt a small crack in the wall he'd built around himself, a reminder that even in a lonely world, a single act could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. Back in the kitchen, James lifted Lily from her high chair, her laughter filling the room. He held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, and made a silent promise. He'd find a way forward, not just for her, but for himself. The stranger's kindness wasn't just diapers or formula, it was a spark, a reminder that goodness still existed, waiting in the quiet moments, ready to change everything. As the sun rose higher, painting the snow gold, Millview carried on. The corner store opened its doors, the neon signs flickering to life. Tina restocked the shelves, humming softly. And somewhere, in the spaces between, James and Ethan moved through their lives, connected by a moment neither would forget, a moment that, in its simplicity, held the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. The snow melted slowly, revealing the world beneath, and life, as it always did, went on.